Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Doomer Optimism podcast. We are here today with Ben and Lucy in New York, and Jeff. I think I can use your first name from Longstory Farms. And we are going to talk today about like brick and mortar local stores and how to do local commerce well in an age of mass globalized corporate industrial markets. And this is how most of us get our goods. And just to put this in context a little bit, for those who aren't super familiar with the show, the idea is to sort of think, how did people used to do things like agriculture, markets, commerce? What is the period we're in now, and how is that kind of like a historical aberration? And then part of what we want to do on the podcast is like prefigure what's to come, kind of based on what used to be, but thinking it might be good to sort of build out these robust local commerce networks before we reach a crisis point and like supply chains break down and now everyone's scrambling for local goods. You know what I mean? So part of the idea here is to prefigure what we sort of see coming down the pipe anyways. So with that, I'll have Ben and Lucy introduce themselves, give me a little background on who you are, and then we can talk about your store, and then I'll have Jeff go and talk about his idea for his store, which he's building. And then we're just going to kind of talk about, the ideals for local commerce and the challenges and, some ideas about how we can fix some of these problems in the moment. So welcome. I'll have Ben and Lucy. You all can go first.
All right. Yep. Husband and wife. Lucy started this store with her friend in 2020, October of the pandemic year.
Okay.
So, as we're seeing like small businesses drop like flies, you see one start. She was down the street, and it was not the center of Auburn downtown, but that's where she is now. Um, I can talk more about Auburn historically. It's kind of fun as far as like there's a I think a lot of towns have this where there's a downtown, the main street where commerce was, and then in the 60s where they did the I forget what they called it, improvement, and then we had like commercial ave happen, like James Howard Kunstler's Geography of Nowhere. Like we have commercial ave that kind of cut the town up where you see roads that go and then they stop because it was a drastic like movement of the commerce to corporate McDonald's and Walmart and all that. So we're here in the downtown area, which the city has done a lot to encourage that here. Um, I guess that's enough on that, and Lucy can talk a little bit more about like what her store is. I'd call it an eco market. My favorite thing is that there are compostable items,
Mm.
like the loofah sponges. I didn't know you can grow. It's a type of squash,
Mm.
and so some of the products you get in here, like the floss, the brushes, you can just toss in your compost bin, or not all will compost, but um,
But it's biodegradable. What wherever it goes instead
yeah,
of
it's a lot of
being
bamboo,
plastic. Yeah. Okay.
which is another interesting thing. It's coming. Bamboo doesn't grow around here. We do have one local uh, wood woodworker. There's cutting boards, spatulas. Um, we could take a little tour around the store at some point, but
Mm.
you take the floor. What do you
So,
got?
um,
Got to talk about TerraCycle.
oh, I got a lot going on. So the name of the store is Reuse Refuge, and we're located right here in downtown Auburn. And I started it, like you said, in October of 2020, which was kind of interesting because a friend of mine had started talking about it um, months and months prior to that, and then COVID hit, and we were like, well, that's probably not going to happen for a long time.
Mm.
But we've been discussing it with other friends. So a friend of mine had a music studio in downtown, and she was like, well, because of COVID, I can't have anybody at my studio. in downtown, and I've kind of always wanted to see something like your idea happen there. So why don't you guys split the space with me? So we opened up the front half of the space for us, and she moved all of her like music stuff in the back, and we just sublet through her in order to start out. So that was like starting out on, I think it was like roughly 600 square feet was what we started with.
Okay.
And then it just kind of continued to evolve. She left the studio, she moved her studio out, and then we opened up the front half of the space again for two other businesses that were subletting through us. So space sharing was a really big help in getting started and continuing. And then a couple people left, and then it was me and one other business splitting the space, and then we decided to move to my current location, and then she left back in January of last year, or technically January of this year. um, so now I've been just by myself in this space since then. So
And and just to like get this good background information, you are paying rent alone now of your own storefront?
yes,
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the rent
And so
increased.
the sharing probably offset some of those costs
it
before.
did for a
Okay.
long time. Yes.
Okay, got it. I think that's good for now. We'll ask more details in a little bit. I'm gonna have Jeff go and kind of give us his background on what he's doing with this similar kind of thing.
Yeah, so we have a small farm. So those that don't know who we are, we have a small farm. It's been my dream for a while to do a farm. I went and saw Polyface, Joel Salatin's farm back in 2012, and my dad had just passed away, and that was part of the motivation. So we wanted to do this farm. We got started really with the farm itself in 2021, where we actually started going to farmers markets and stuff. I still have I have a day job, so I have a pretty big day job. I can't dedicate 100% of my time to this. But one of the things that is going on in our downtown is it's being it's kind of starting to grow, and all the buildings are starting to be occupied, but everything is like geared towards tourists. So it's
Mhm.
like antique shops and stuff like that, or a lot of beauty shops, antique shops, and stuff geared towards tourists. So we wanted to do something that would further our farm business, provide a better market for our farm business, but also address kind of like what's available downtown, in the downtown itself, that's different than what Walmart and Food Line, which are two large grocers here, offer. So we had been looking at some real estate downtown. We bought a building that is in basically the first block up from the Memorial Park, which is where the farmers market is, ironically, and the Chamber of Commerce. So it's right there, kind of right there at the heart of downtown. The building had been in, anyway, a lot of work to be done on the building. That's probably the biggest issue right now, is trying to get through all of that. But what we want to do is have 4 or 5 farm vendors that we would offer their products. We haven't really figured out how we're going to price, that's one of the challenges we have to work on. And then we want to offer like the dispensers, so people like zero waste refillery type stuff. So people come in, they fill up a bag, with chocolate chips or pasta or rice or whatever it is, and there's no packaging. So, zero waste. We do, some of the eco market kind of ideas as well, some of the personal care products, things like that. We would do similar things to what what you guys are describing. So it would be kind of like a mini grocery store, but focused on as much local as possible. So we want to put food miles on every product, so people can walk in and say, "Hey, this pork is from 4 miles away,"
Oh,
or "This
cool.
olive oil is from 5,000 miles away," or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. All right, so in this conversation, I do want to like first couch it using my sociological, my PhD, my sociological background to say, like, basically what we're talking about here is we're trying to redevelop these what were historically very, very common networks of commerce that would be, it would make most sense to have exchange closest to home. It's completely a historical anomaly that it's so easy for us to have products from all over the world that we don't even know the origin of, that like there's almost the glut is like the gluttony of it is so absurd that it's to the point now where like the problem is really just labeling and knowing what the stuff is that's coming in from all over the place, when like typically historically you would have, depending on what period of time you're talking about, but in any kind of lower energy society, you'd be having, you'd have awareness of where things were coming from. And you would be obviously prioritizing the most local as possible because you didn't have just infinite energy to be shipping things all around the world. Um, so the goal here, and like maybe one way to describe when I think about these things, or when I like, I spent a lot of time in my early 20s thinking about the collapse of complex civilizations. I would walk through downtowns and I would be like, this is so adorable. This little village is so cute. But if it's ever like a cute little downtown, it has turned into a touristy area, and almost every shop has things in it filled with completely unnecessary goods. Like literally every shop is just things you don't need. It's like home decor or like bathing suits or whatever, like or bars and restaurants and that kind of thing. But it's just like little like crafts and stuff, which is fine. I mean, crafts are fine, but it's just where are the necessities? Like where's the hardware store? Where's the bakery? Where's the grocery store? Where can you get health food? Or what the things that are in your store, Lucy, personal care, home care, products, like things where you actually need to on your day-to-day life. So I would used to be thinking about this forever. And so it's really cool that people are experimenting with this, but then you're also butting up against the reality of our economic world and trying to make a market. This is the same thing with people who do like regen ag. They're so historically informed, but they're sort of ahead of the game in the marketplace. And so it's kind of like one of these things, like you're swimming upstream. So part of what we wanted to talk about today is like how to succeed despite knowing all that and knowing you're swimming upstream, but doing it anyways, and being part of the people who we have on this podcast are just so pig-headed in the best way. Like, I don't care, I'm doing this, I'm just going to try to do it. I know that like the whole world is less sustainable and everything, people like would just prefer to click a button on Amazon and not do anything, but I'm going to do it anyways because I think it's important, and I believe in it. And I think there are customers who agree. So maybe the first thing we should do is, if you don't have anything else to add to that, or maybe you do, we could start with that. And then secondarily, maybe we could start like doing nuts and bolts, like who are your actual customers? Who are the people? What are the demographics of your place? Do either of you have anything to add to like my sociological analysis there before we move on to the nuts and bolts? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have anything to add, but I was curious. I'm reading a book on the Erie Canal, and that's obviously tourism for them. I was just reading that the state was like, well, your land's more valued now, even though we cut right through it. Just put up a tavern and sell alcohol and sell people warm meals when they're coming by, and that was like a big chunk of the income. So Jeff had mentioned it's a little unfortunate that there's so much income in tourism, but not the main metabolism of our own community, the main metabolism of, food and house supplies here, like soap and cleaning, things you have to do that are necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I'm also finding personally that it benefits everybody to try to include everybody. I've got a demographic of people that very much care about going absolutely zero waste. They're hardcore. And then I've got a group of people that are just the cutesy girlies. They want their skincare and they want, it's great that it's eco-friendly for them. That's kind of
Yeah.
just a note for them. But there is that aspect of it that's been like, I need these people and I need these people and I need these people and I need these people. So I try to kind of go across the board and tap into a little bit of everything.
Mm.
And I think that like getting into the thrifted clothing has been a big connector for everybody because it's
Mm,
very familiar for people to like, oh, this is like a reuse store. There's clothes here that I can look for. Um, and especially in like a smaller town like ours, I think that like our geographical demographic, um, they're a little bit more used to thrifting, whereas if I was to go to a more affluent area, that might be kind of considered not as exciting to them.
mm,
So I just have had to like go with the flow throughout all these years of just what are people looking for? How can I make that eco-friendly?
mm,
Because in my opinion, I've found that like there's a way to do something eco-friendly, even if it's just a baby step in the right direction,
mm-hmm,
and just try to do that.
mm.
So it's
Yeah.
great that I've been able to be so flexible and like I can grow so exponentially with this concept that it gets a little overwhelming sometimes because I'm like, I want to get this in here and I want to get this in here and I want to get that. And then I'm like, slow down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
Jeff, do you want to add something? And then I have a
well,
couple
yeah. I mean, I
questions.
think one of the things, the first thing I wanted to talk about is just how recent the long supply chains and grocery stores even are. You kind of alluded to that, but really it's a post World War II phenomenon where
Hmm.
we're acting like it's completely normal for civilization, and
Yeah.
it's really a very recent aberration. So the idea of home production, the idea of trading with local folks that like you said, the baker or whatever, is we've lost it over the last basically two and a half generations. So that's kind of an oddity. But then the other thing I really resonate with what you guys are talking about with your demographic and having to include everyone. I think we understand that probably most consumers of our farm products are not going to exclusively source meat from us. They're going to get some beef maybe from the grocery store, and they're going to buy maybe their chicken from us or whatever it might be. And the community is really excited about what we're going to do. We tried really hard to tailor our offering so that it kind of fit in between the niche offerings of some other retailers, because
Mm,
there's another retailer, it's kind of like a butcher shop, and they do some similar kind of local stuff, but they're not as local as we are, and they do more of like your like um bulk breaking than we want to do. So they're like buying something at like a regular like restaurant supply store and then breaking it down into smaller packaging for people. We want to do zero waste, so that's a big aspect of it. We want to do low food miles. So those are two things we're going to try to really push. We think that there's a market for that. From the demographics of our town and county, the town is about 5 to 6 thousand people. The county is only about 40,000. We're about 30% African American, about 10% Hispanic, and it's growing, and it's growing in size, number of population, but also in income, because it's becoming a bit of a bedroom community for the capital city, Columbia, here in South Carolina. And so I think we're investing in the real estate at the right time, which is part of our big equation, right? Because as it continues to grow, that real estate will appreciate. That should help us out. But
mm,
my main point was going to be that even though I really am a little bit resentful of the fact that our downtown has turned into a tourist destination, we will definitely need those tourists to
Yeah.
to be successful, right? So it's a two-edged sword, but I
yeah.
want the
Why don't we
necessity to
talk
be
about
there.
that? Yeah, why don't we
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit? Because like, okay, let's try to put it in the context of like the larger, historical changes that we've been discussing, from, this relatively recent high energy thing. A lot of people complain about the tourists on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's always this tension because you don't want a depopulated town, especially not if you're starting a store, like so, there's always this tension of like the local culture, you want to like maintain and keep the local culture intact. But then if you are trying to kind of prefigure a more localist future, you're gonna have to rely on like a small subset of people who are conscientious and who will do the um more difficult and more expensive thing because they think it's healthier or it's more ethical or whatever their reasons are. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in some ways. Like but you don't want people coming in and taking over the town and totally upending it. And Neil Clark is always like the kombucha bar. People who come in and like to a rural area that's like a beer drinking community and there's a kombucha bar there and people are like, what the hell is kombucha?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. What are all of your feelings about that question to start?
It reminds me of Woody Tosh. He wrote Slow Money, the inquiries into the nature of slow money or something, and he had said that like, what do we do about this problem where like the one hand finances the other hand, of things that we don't have a choice over, things that we don't value, things that are doing things that we don't choose. Um, yeah.
Yep, totally.
Yeah,
Jeff,
there's
do you have
definitely
yeah.
been some times where I've had to stock something just because people have asked me for it. Like for example, essential oils are something that people are constantly asking me for, but because I understand the like background of like it's a little bit culty sometimes, and some really there's some like really gnarly politics that go into harvesting the ingredients to make the essential oils and like
Mm,
harvesting all of those plants all at once just to make one vial of essential oils is like
right.
very damaging to the environment. And then you get into like the certain types of essential oils have to come from this very specific place in a different culture, and that's like a big part of their culture, and now we're just coming in and sweeping all of that off of them, and it's
But
like
then like the hippie types love essential oils.
yeah. And I do
Well,
think that it's better for your skin than like synthetic fragrances. So I'm not entirely against it, but I'm trying to see if I can find a middle ground where it's just like, okay, this company's doing okay. They're
That's
not
interesting.
pushing you really hard to sell their product and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I have a handful of just a couple of things just to have on hand, but
I think it's a little bit like cashews.
mm,
Right.
Cashews is like that kind of market where you're really upending the local economy and ecology to make sure that people can have their, whatever it is, or their cashew cheese or whatever it is, their vegan
yeah.
cheese or whatever it might be. And so you think you're making a good choice because it's vegan, and which of course I don't agree with being a protein farmer, but you think you're making a good choice, but you're not really seeing the consequences down the line. And
Hmm.
that's one reason we want to really emphasize food miles, because
Hmm.
if we can source almost all of our food products within 60 miles of the store, that's our goal. And then we know we're going to have to make compromises, kind of like what you're saying, where we're going to say, well, if we want to have olive oil, we're going to have to get that from at least a couple thousand miles away.
Yep.
And if we want to have cocoa, that's going to be another few thousand miles away. So we're going
Yep.
to have some compromises, but we want to at least call out to people that they are compromises.
Hmm.
That's what we want the thing now. And I do want to speak really briefly to what you said about people that are going to do the harder, less convenient, or more expensive thing. I think what we're going to lean into the fact that it's going to be more expensive, but we are going to try to make it very handy. Um, our store, there's not a lot of great parking right at the store itself. There's parking in the town. It's kind of a little bit walkable. It's not super walkable, but it's walkable. It's not blocked off from vehicular traffic, but there's accessible public parking within 2 blocks of our store. So, but it's not, if it's raining or it's really cold or really hot, then it's going to be inconvenient. So we're going to try to offer delivery within the city limits,
Oh, cool.
to try to keep, make it more convenient. Like, hey, you could go do curbside pickup at Walmart, but we'll drop it off, leave a cooler on your front porch, and we'll put it in the cooler for you.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to try to say, look, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to be super high service, and we're going to make it more convenient.
Mm.
The last thing I'll say is I think the big leap we're taking, both with the farm and with the store, is we're expecting people to know how to cook.
Mm.
And that is a bit of a dying art. Going back to what we were saying about supply chains have been lengthened, grocery stores, convenience foods, prepared foods, microwavable, all that stuff is a big part of people's diets right now. And if you say to someone, hey, I've got a whole chicken to sell you, they're like, whoa, what would I do with a whole chicken? I'm like, geez, man, I thought that was like just normal,
Yeah.
but it's not for a lot of people.
Yep.
Treat it like science class.
What
Open it up and see what you want to cook out of it.
Yeah. So, okay, actually, now that you guys are talking about this, I think it might be useful to back up for just a second before we can get into some of like the nuts and bolts and challenges you guys are facing, Ben and Lucy, and we can talk like, practical approaches. But first I want to ask why we've alluded to it, but nobody said it explicitly. Why are you doing this? Why do you have a store like this? And I'll have Ben and Lucy go first and then Jeff. What's the point? Like, why? I've kind of put words in your mouth, like you're swimming against the current, you're trying to do X, Y, and Z, it's good for the environment, it's ethical, but like from your own perspective, like why put yourself through this?
I remember we were talking about the landfill. We had a situation where the town was talking about it's going to fill up, and we're going to have to find out a different place to put it. And then we're looking at all these single-use things. So that was one of the big reasons, was to reduce the waste in everyone's household that they produce. And one of the lowest hanging fruits was, well, you clean your house, you wash yourself, you have personal care items. Let's have an offer things that aren't going to end up in the landfill of those things. And then from there, it grew into thrift items that are upcycled.
I would say that another big inspiration for us was that we had a daughter 5.5 years ago, and it's like even before we conceived her, we were constantly like in this turmoil of what is the future going to look like, and it's just this nerve-wracking, like terrifying concept to think about bringing a person into this world and not knowing what the heck is going to happen. And I don't know, I guess at just one point I was like, well, I'm going to be sad either way, so I guess I'd rather hold a baby and be sad.
Well, and also like part of the doomer optimism thing is like, okay, yeah, I mean, you can bring a kid into the world, and we had a similar kind of thing, bring a baby into the world, but all you can really do is to make your effort on this planet to make the world better for their lives. All you can really do is that. Maybe it spreads out, maybe other people pick up on it, maybe you impact in ways that are beyond your own like specific life, but all you can really do is that. And so it's cool, it's interesting to hear. That's a very doomer optimism story of like
wanted to have kids or a kid before we got anxious about climate change. I felt like it's one of the best ways to experience the human condition is to open yourself up to the vulnerabilities of your child. You experience that much more joy, but you're vulnerable to experience that much more terror if you lose them before you die.
Yeah, and then sorry, go ahead.
I've also gotten like more agnostic on that, like the climate emergency stuff.
Yeah.
In the past few years, but
I will say, and then I'll toss it to Jeff. It's really cool to hear you say this, especially like the plastic, just how much plastic and packaging we throw out. And like, you can argue all day about it's yuppies, what's actually green, what's actually like sustainable, whatever. But fundamentally, there are a few things that are just good to do. I don't care if it's yuppies who do it and are like the bleeding edge of it. I don't care. It's just good to limit throwing plastic unnecessarily into the landscape for no reason. So it's nice to just like sometimes just put your foot down and be like, some of these things are unequivocally good. I know they come with other aspects, but we need to try to move toward this particular world where we're not just so wasteful with polluting our landscape for no real clear reason besides like efficiency or cost or like convenience.
We're always trying to find the better option and not necessarily the best option, because the best option is usually the least accessible.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, it's baby steps, but it's just cool to just hear you say that, because sometimes like you can get caught up in the middle ground of like, well, it's this, it's that, and maybe it's like you're trading off too much about it doesn't matter. One thing we want to at least there is a North Star here. It's less pollution. It's more sustainability. We're working towards it, but that's like an unequivocally good thing. Jeff, why are you starting this store?
Well, so I really kind of wanted to do something really like I'm going to talk about the aesthetic first, and then we'll get
Okay.
into the products. But I want to do something really rustic, like you would think of like an old general store. You walk in, there's like sawdust on the floor, and it's like real just whatever. And you just there's a couple freezers with some meat, and maybe there's some seedlings in another corner under a grow light, and whatever. Like just
I love an old general store. They had them in
yeah,
Uruguay, and they have everything there. It's the only store in town.
yeah,
You
yeah.
got to get everything in one place. The shelves go up to the ceiling.
Yeah, and it turns out that you can't do any of that stuff with current food regulations. So you
Now
just
you
have
can
to
in Uruguay, the
make a
Wild West, but
compromise.
yeah.
But anyway, so I wanted this like really rustic aesthetic. We're still going to have a pretty rustic aesthetic. The building's according to the National Register has been around since 1941. We think it's probably at least the shell of a building that's been there since the turn of the
Mm.
turn of the 20th century. So early 1900s. So it's got we've got a picture of it from back when it was like Model T time kind of thing.
Mm.
But so it's an older building. It's going to have some of that aesthetic. But what it evolved to is that we've got 1,620 square feet, so it's very small. We're going to have about 600 or 700 that's is going to be a commercial kitchen with some cold storage, a prep area, dishwashing area, what we have to do to comply with the law. And then the rest is retail. And we're going to be packing in as much food and calories as we can at that space. The big motivation for me was I wanted two things. I wanted a market for the farm, so I wanted to be able to scale the farm operation. And I feel like, and we talked about this before when we talked about you're coming back from Uruguay. But I feel like farmers markets are like the vacation of food shopping. And I felt like we really had to make this part of people's routine where they, even if they're a tourist that's coming through on once a month, or they come through for festivals, they think to themselves, hey, I got to stop by Farms on Main in Newberry because they've got the best chorizo I've ever had, or whatever it is. That becomes part of their routine. And other people say, look, I can't afford maybe to, like I was saying earlier, I can't afford to shop there for every meal, but when I'm going to do pork chops, I know I'm going to get them from Longstory Farms, and I can go pick them up at the store. Or, that kind of, so I want it to become part of their routine. We want to start off, once we get the commercial kitchen inspected and everything, we want to move into prepared foods. That's where that's where we will probably have the margins to actually profit. But so my motivation was to create a market for the store, make it part of people's routines, for the farm, sorry, and make it part of people's routines, and then to have something that was as local as it possibly can be, and really provide something for the community, not just for tourists. That was like, those are the two overarching things for me. Again, we need the tourist. We hope they come. We hope that they flood the streets with our Oktoberfest and our Pork in the Park and all these other festivals that
And then they go
town
home.
puts on, and they take home 10 or 15 pounds of Longstory Farms meats and some other stuff that we have in the store. That's what we're hoping for. So
yeah. And is it also fair to say that you would also like to help local farmers access markets?
That's the other thing. I said a market for our farm, but what we have microgreens grower near us. We have a produce and cut flower grower near us. We have other protein farmers near us. So we think that we can provide those guys with another outlet. But the other thing is that we can that does two things, right? It's part of the strategy of making it part of people's routine, because it rounds out our offering. So now we can offer, instead of pork and poultry, which is what we kind of do at the farm, we can offer pork, poultry, beef, lamb, eggs, raw dairy, and produce, cut flowers, microgreens, along with the zero waste, refillery products, personal care products. So people can basically come there for most of the things they would buy at a Walmart or a Food Line, except for maybe paper goods.
Okay, that's
kind of
cool.
what we're
Yeah.
thinking.
I want to make one comment and then we can move on to like the nuts and bolts part of the conversation. But it's really cool. I really like what you said about the aesthetic part because if we're talking like historically, people know the sort of feeling you get in one of these older general stores or an on-farm store, you know, like where it's like it feels more real, the products are more real, the people like the clerks aren't just like some, you know, automaton or literally a machine, but instead a real human. And so I think it's really important to think about that because the aesthetic component to a lot of these things is under discussed, I would say, and like how people feel and their experience of it, I think matters a lot in trying to like get them to remember, you know, what was this earlier culture like, you know, and bringing that forward. So that's really cool. I'm glad you said that. Okay, so maybe it would be fun now to do a little tour. If you can show us Ben and Lucy. You're in your store right now, Jeff, or no?
I am I
Oh,
am in
you're at
my
home.
kitchen.
Oh,
You're just
nice.
seeing
Okay.
you're seeing some home production here, some canned turkey stock and stuff behind me.
Oh my God, it looks
But
like a store. Very
yes,
well
my wife
organized.
is very
Tell
organized
your
and
wife I
has a very good
approve.
eye for
From
that
one
stuff.
Virgo to another.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so Ben and Lucy, give us a little tour and show us what you got going, and then we can talk about challenges after that, like, you know, what
All
you're
right. Yeah.
experiencing at the moment.
Let me see. I don't think I can turn the camera around, so I'll have to like have my
Pick up
face
the
to your face and then look. Let's see. Chalkboard. She talks about her TerraCycle. How much is a TerraCycle box, which is a company that she can explain in depth.
Okay.
But let's see. So what do we have here?
I have a lot of like secondhand decor and kitchenware, and then these are he talked a little bit about the
Local woodworker.
local woodworker that
Oh,
makes
cool. Yep.
woodwork stuff. Um,
Dog brush. Oh, the thing you can actually, without a, instead of a vacuum, what do you call that?
the lint room.
Yeah.
Cute.
Show that
Yeah.
up to the camera. Because it actually, Lucy took about, I don't know, 20 minutes, half hour, and she got every single piece of hair off of our carpet, dog hair.
Nice.
And like you can do it with a vacuum, but that thing
Yeah.
got all of it. So
Yeah. It looks really nice.
just
It's
a
set up really
simple
cute. Yep.
deodorant.
Cream. It's like natural deodorant, and then I've got the refill buckets so people can keep bringing these containers back and refilling them.
Oh, neat. Okay.
So yeah, and then over here is more of the refills.
I see. And then I see the secondhand clothes.
And
Refill
plastic's still
station.
unavoidable.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
a lot of these companies, like this company, Rustic Strength, they will take their containers back and
Okay.
sanitize and reuse them. So you'll see like a little sticker over here that says "I'm on tour" on my
Oh,
little.
cool. Yeah. That's nice. So people just,
find
or
stuff
they'll
like
buy a
that.
bottle and then they'll bring it back to refill.
Say again?
They'll
They'll
buy a
buy
bottle
a
and then bring
bottle.
it back refill.
Yep, they can
Or-
or they can bring one in as
Yeah.
long as it's good and clean. And then I've got some containers that people have donated to me and I've cleaned over and over again. And
Okay.
Actually,
Our
No.
food regulations here don't allow us to do that.
No.
We have to sell them the bottle. Yeah.
oh man,
Yeah.
that is
Really?
frustrating.
yeah.
Ugh.
But there's some of the
I would think
reusable
South Carolina
bottles.
would be more lax than New York.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, what else? Anything else? What big sections you want to show us?
Got some locally made stained glass pieces
Oh,
and some
nice. That's pretty.
crocheted stuff and
Do you have like a lot of local like artisans?
yes.
Selling
So that
things.
was something I was going to talk about a little bit more in depth too, is that I have a lot of people in on consignment, and that's been a really big way of getting local vendors to stock the shop. It's really filled the shop in a lot, and
Okay.
that way it takes like the risk off of me.
It's
Where
only
like
if they
I buy
if
it
you sell it.
wholesale, it's like, well, hopefully it sells, and then
Yeah.
it might sit on the shelf for years. Whereas if I have somebody that makes something, I will take 30% after it sells.
Okay,
So they
yeah,
just bring me whatever, they put a price on it accordingly to like what they need back and what they can give me. And then if they want to swap stuff out, they can swap stuff out. So it's really refreshing and it really helps build the shop with like actually local handmade things. Like I've got candles and room sprays that a friend
nice.
of mine makes.
Okay. All right. So let's, yeah, why don't we sit back down and then let's talk a little bit about the challenges because it's something Jeff and I have spoken privately about before this conversation is I think you all are in two kind of different, there's something substantively different about the products you're selling. So food that is perishable is different in some cases than, like an artisan craft good. And so we were talking a little bit about the consignment. I don't think it works as well with food, especially not perishable food. But let's talk first a little bit from Ben and Lucy. What are the challenges you're facing right now? um, Specifically, and then maybe we can just get into just brainstorming about that, and then your operation's not open yet, right, Jeff? Okay, so yeah, you guys go first on your challenges, and then we
I
can.
can certainly talk about the problems of trying to renovate an old building, though, if you'd like to hear about that.
But then we can talk about what you're planning to do on the nuts and bolts of the store, and then
Yeah, maybe it would be good to hear from Ben and Lucy about some of the ideas that we have, and maybe they can shoot them down and help me
yeah,
avoid some
right.
heartache in the future.
Yes,
Oh.
right, exactly. So let's hear from Ben and Lucy first about what are some of the challenges you're facing? What are you thinking to solve them? How are things structured, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So you
Um,
do consignment.
I do consignment, and that's helped. Like one of the biggest challenges I had initially, was trying to stock enough inventory at the shop so that it didn't look so bare.
Mm,
Um, Especially last January and a little bit before that, the lady I was sharing space with was in the process of leaving. And so I was like, what am I going to do? I've got to find somebody else that can help share the space, or I've got to figure out a way to fill the space. And I was already doing a little bit of consignment here and there. And I was like, well, why don't I just expand on that and try to find like as many local vendors. So I go to like a lot of local markets and like the holiday fairs and things like that and set up a table. So that year I made it a point to go around and pick up a bunch of um, business cards and then contact people and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. Would you like to stock something at the shop on consignment? And that really, really filled the space in a lot and gave me a lot of buffer to be able to keep covering the expenses, and it solved the problem of not having enough inventory anymore. Now I've got inventory coming out the yin yang,
mhm,
and
There was a funny thing with because rent was such of a big chunk of it when she moved down to more into the heart of downtown, and eventually the landlords worked with her to get it lower.
yeah.
But there were some funny things where I would say, "Oh, when are you going to get more of this in?" I say, "Well, with this vendor that I get that from, I have to have a minimum order of $400. So I'm waiting for other things that I need to get from there." So it's some of it is like it's not fit for a store this small, like some of
mm,
those products that people were selling. Like
Mm.
we have Green Star is what it's called.
In
Ithaca.
Ithaca,
Ithaca is like an hour south of us.
mm,
And so they're a little bit bigger store that has some of
you're
that
way
stuff.
bigger at this point.
But with Lucy's size, there were some issues there with bottlenecks of having to meet a
Hmm.
minimum order size when she didn't
For
need like
wholesale.
she had some vendors that she liked for certain products, but then others because they're closer,
Hmm.
and then others because they were using a product that I don't know. Lucy did a lot of research on the different skincare products and some of the greenwashings and all that. Uh,
mm.
she's pretty adept in that.
Yeah.
And then TerraCycle is customer funded, right?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
tell us about TerraCycle real quick, and then tell me, are you like struggling to make enough money to pay the rent and pay yourselves? Like, yeah, so first tell me about TerraCycle, and then I want to hear those challenges, and then we can start talking.
Okay.
Um,
So TerraCycle is a company that I believe is based in New Jersey, but they have several places around the United States for housing or not housing, for storing waste products and then recycling them. So they aim to recycle things that are not usually curbside recyclable. And I've always wanted to, the way that they have their situation set up is you buy a box from them for a certain amount of money, and then you fill that box up either with a specific type of material, or the boxes that I get are like an all waste box. So there's only like 5 or 6 different things that they won't accept in the box. Like they won't accept any broken glass. They can't accept like biohazards. They can't accept organic material, like food scraps or anything like that in there. Um, so the way I had it set up here, I started a few years ago, was to collect donations at the register and then keep track of a little bit of a budget for that, and then buy the box. And then every month I take a different material based on suggestions from my customers that are in this little cloud here.
Cute.
And I announce that on all my social media every month that hey, this month we're taking envelopes. Did you know that you can't put those in the recycling bin? And I take more suggestions. I've got a local business that does some sponsoring for the boxes too. So I keep like kind of side advertising their stuff too, which is really helpful for them. And it helps bring people into the store too, because they're like, I've been saving these little plastic things for so long. I can't believe you're recycling them. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So that and batteries.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now what are the challenges you all are facing right now? Is it just, not enough purchases, and
Yeah, I think
what
so. The city is, you were looking at like the size of Auburn, the population was like 13 or 16,000. Because like those this type of person who saves those plastics and stuff, I would say like in a city, maybe it's like what percentage of people are doing something like that, or what percentage of people is Lucy's demographic. And I think about like if she was near a big metropolitan area, there would probably be enough people that would come in to make it financially sustainable. But
Mm,
our closest city is Syracuse and Ithaca, and those are not
Oswego.
massive cities. Oswego.
We're kind of like triangulated between Syracuse, Oswego, and Ithaca.
Yeah. So that's my best guess is there isn't enough people who, I mean, there are people there that are still finding out that she's here, 5 years after she's been open. Like, oh my God, how long have you been here? I've been looking for something like this.
Yeah, I get new
So,
people every day.
she does marketing on social media as much as she can, and some events around. There's a climate action group that she works with.
Mhm. I would say that a big challenge is that we're doing this very much by ourselves. So like the
Her,
labor is very intensive on just us, and I can't
her
like
hours
I
revolve.
can't begin to pay anybody else to come in and try to help out
Yeah.
with that.
That's a big though. Her store hours revolve around when I come home from work.
Yeah.
So I work Monday through Friday.
Or when Kinley's at school.
Yeah, which helps. She turned 5, and that, well, she was going to school then, but that's been a big thing to allow her to open her hours into like the lunch hour here in downtown. The people are on break from their work here, so lawyers' offices and all that. But yeah, her hours are wonky, and then sometimes she's home with Kinley. Something comes up and
Snow
she can't
days,
maintain
sick
regular
days.
hours.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Jeff, so maybe we can talk a little bit about what you're planning. I know you're planning to have family members work at the store. What are your plans for that?
Yeah, so my daughter, my daughter just got food safe certified as a kitchen manager. My wife and daughter just took a food entrepreneurship from the Clemson University Extension Service. So they're the ones that are going to kind of man the store. We've talked to a couple of farmers, and some of them might be willing to work like the register for a few hours here and there. We've talked about this is from our group chat, Ashley, but we've talked about a couple of different models for how the farmers could participate, because you really want to make it accessible for them, but we also have to make money, right? We have to be able to at least pay people to be there. So kind of the default is 30% margin on anything that comes from another farm or whatever. We need to make 30%. But one of the things we talked about doing is maybe have a farmer pay like a subscription, like a marketing fee, basically, and we would include their stuff in subscription boxes or something like that. And so this might be a way for some farmers who didn't want to pay the marketing, they could work it off, so to speak. So we're experimenting with that. I mean, we're I shouldn't say experimenting. We're thinking about experimenting with that, I should say. But primarily, my daughter and my wife would be the ones manning the store. And as we get the kitchen built out and we actually start producing product, I think we'll have to consider other participants from the family. Maybe, I'm not sure yet, but we'll start with I have 4 kids, so
And they're all grown.
they're all 17 up, so
Yep.
and they're around, so we might lose one here soon, but to life
College
and being
or
an adult and everything.
yeah.
But we'll start with the family. So
Yeah.
that'll be our main labor force. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, we had talked a little bit about this. Maybe we want to discuss that model, the cooperative, maybe, or like a hybrid cooperative style model where, you have farmers. If you think about farmers specifically, or even like artisans, you go and sit at a craft fair all day for however many sales, and same with the farmers market. It really doesn't make sense, and ideally a brick and mortar store would be a step up from that model, which is so individualistic to the point of like, why am I, as a farmer who also often have some other day job, spending my whole Saturday sitting at this marketplace when the whole point of a store is that it aggregates that stuff, and it's like not everybody has to sit and do their own direct marketing themselves. So ideally you could set something up where the incentives are such that the amount of time and money they're spending marketing their own thing could be lowered by using your store, but then in return they have to do some sort of once a month, or twice a month, or once a week, or whatever it is, coming into the store and manning the register, and then that's less than the time that they would already be spending at like a market
Yeah.
or a fair or whatever.
I mean, our experience with farmers markets is it takes an hour and a half or 2 hours to get everything packed up and ready to go. It takes another 3 or 4 hours at the market itself. Then you have to pack everything up and bring it back and put it back in the freezers or whatever, so it ends up being like a 6 or 8 hour day at a minimum, depending on how far away the fair is. And I'm sure that goes the same for like craft fairs and other things that you guys would participate in. So it ends up being, unless you can, and our margins are probably in the high single digits on a per unit basis. We don't cover the fixed cost of the farm at this point, but let's just say that, let's just assume we had a 10% margin before we, pay people. We would need to do, $2,000 at a market to really pay people to be there for 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
And we're probably averaging, more like 400 or 500 a market, right? So it's really like the whole market is itself a marketing expense right now. It's an expense. It's not really how you generate sales. So my thought would be that for a lot of farmers, it would be a net positive for them. But anyway,
do you have any questions, Jeff, for Ben and Lucy in terms of what you're planning to do, and maybe get there if they have any experience with any of these?
Well, I thought it was interesting, the consignment 30. You mentioned 30% as a commission, so I think that's an interesting starting point. So I would love to hear like how you settled on 30%. I think the other thing I would love to know is like how you're working with the local woodworker. Like, what's your arrangement with someone like that, or a local candle maker or soap maker? Because we've certainly plan to carry those types of products, and we have local people that are making them that would like to participate. So
So it was something that was suggested to us by another lady that has a brick and mortar here. And she's been around for quite a little bit. Um, she's a wealth of knowledge, which is great. Um, but she kind of explained to us how she does hers, and then we've kind of asked around about other people that do the same thing and how much they charge and different types of setups that people have. Because some people will say, like, here's the exact amount of square footage that you're going to get, and here's what that costs me per square foot per month. So then you have to pay what that is going to cover for the rent. And then I take the 30% after that, even.
Mm.
So for some people, it's 50% instead of 30%. So because we wanted to be a little bit competitive with that so that we could get more people in, we were just like, it's just 30% after it sells. And like, I think in our original contract, it was like, if your item has been here for more than 30 days, like swap it out or come pick it up. So I've kind of evolved that when I started up a new contract like a couple of years ago, in that like it's 30% after it sells. Here's the information I need from you. Here's how I'm going to do payouts. I do a payout at the end of every month via check. So I need an address to send the check to, and I need a phone number, and then you're responsible for keeping me up to date with your address and your phone number if any of that changes,
Mm.
that kind of thing. And most people are like, you're only taking 30%. That's great. So yeah, I'll definitely do that. So there's been times where I'm like, maybe I should up the rate a little bit. Um, just because it is a competitive thing at this point. So, and it would be helpful to get a little bit more of a margin out of it. And I've had some vendors that are like, I just really want you to stay here. So take 50% off mine. It's
Aw.
30. So it, but then it's like, okay, well, now I have to remember that you get 50%. And
Right.
it's
Right.
30, and other people have suggested that too. And I'm like, well, now it's you and someone else. Who is it? And so it gets a little bit cumbersome, especially at the end of every month, going through figuring out whose stuff sold, how much I owe them, sending out the check. And for certain vendors, I'll go through and say, this is exactly what sold for you so that you can restock that, or you know what's selling so that you can look for that in the future. And
So
that
so
kind of,
are you doing the local woodworker and stuff like that on that consignment model?
yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
There's a local guy here that makes like little sculptures out of disused scrap metal from farm equipment, and they're
Oh,
Mm.
really cool, and I'd love to have a
yeah.
couple.
Yeah.
But they take up a lot of space. And
Mm,
there's a couple woodworkers, candle makers, soap makers we've talked to about all that stuff.
yeah.
So
That's neat.
that
Exactly.
probably might work for really well for some of the those types of things,
Non-perishables.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Non-perishables.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other, I want to ask some larger, bigger picture questions, but any other aspects of the store that I kind of haven't really asked about that are pain points for you all, Ben and Lucy, that you kind of want to talk about and maybe make a plea to listeners like because I think I really liked what you said at the beginning, and this is part of our whole theory of change on this podcast, which is that you kind of do have to meet people where they're at. You do need to build a big tent. You need to think about, different types of people who might be drawn to these kinds of products for different reasons and have, room for all of those types of people and build these coalitions of people. Because again, like anyone, the mainstream is going to do the simplest possible thing that's the cheapest and most efficient. And, you can't really blame people for taking advantage of like government subsidies that force all of our hands in this direction, even though it's like a total historical anomaly. So you have this niche group. You're trying to capture them, but then, they have their own limitations. I know there was also a lot during the pandemic. People were looking local. They were worried about global supply chains, and now that's waned a little bit. And part of our theory is that it's, this collapse, even if it's not collapse, if it's transformation, it's like takes fits and starts. It's like, something big happens, everybody freaks out, then everyone's like all of a sudden looking for local food or regenerative food or learning how to homestead. And then it, evens back out a bit. People get a false sense of security, and then, something big happens again. So, any
Can I
other
just
big, yeah, go
can I
ahead.
say one thing about that?
Yeah.
I think that I get really annoyed with people with the linear thinking. And so, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone's like they shifted their thinking to this linear model of like everything's going to hell. And
Right.
so they're like, oh, I've got a homestead, I've got to make my whatever it is, I've got to
Yeah.
shop local. And then when it stopped, it immediately reverted back to old thinking, but still linear, which
Yeah.
is
It's
everything's gonna be
everything's
fine now.
great. Everything's
Yeah,
totally great and fine and will
yeah.
be forever. And
And
then
it's like,
everything's horrible and collapsing and will be forever. As opposed to
yeah,
these things kind of like go in
yep,
stages where, well, at least like how every other civilization goes, same way on the upswing. It's like
yep,
all of a sudden a bunch of stuff happens that's really good and transformational, and everybody's like readapts to that reality, and then, it's a steady state for a while, and it's so same thing on the downswing. So, it's just like people have to have a little bit longer of a historical, timeline when thinking about these
yeah.
things. But yeah, Ben and Lucy, anything on that or any other challenges we didn't ask about that you want to talk
You
about?
did, you did, you were looking at women-owned certification because it's her store. Um, and there was a lot of headache around that. And one of your mentors here kind of warned against, um, was it that or just grants in general? That was a whole nother thing to tap into is the grants way. But you have to,
Hmm.
I don't know, grants are just this amorphous thing that I don't understand. That you can write grants, you can get some of this money that's out there. Um, but so one of her biggest sales is the local school district has an emergency supply for kids who maybe their house burns down or something. So it's like soap and laundry detergent,
Toothbrushes.
toothbrushes and things like that. And so they come in and they spend like a good chunk that helps her get through the year.
Hmm.
But they have to, it's within a government program that it needs to be a minority or a women-owned business. So
Yeah, they have to
so
purchase a certain percentage from women-owned businesses.
so you were working on
So,
the certification and the paperwork was like,
yeah.
and you submitted it twice and then they like,
No, I submitted it once, but it was very cumbersome of just like they want every piece of paper that's ever come through my hands, and they want to make dang sure that I'm not a millionaire. And I'm like, there's like five of those. Can't you just process of elimination figure out that I'm not one? Like, but yeah.
here you mean?
Well,
Well,
and
yeah, the bureaucratic
so
aspect of this, like it's so, I mean, to just be sociological about it, like, or talk about the structures, like there's so much money that tips the hand toward, this like industrial subsidized food
yeah.
system and like commerce system. And so then you as the small fish like try to compete in just the free market with no help, and then you try to like get some grant funding which would not even be close to parity with what these large industrial producers are getting, but then you're like everything is tilted toward the large scale, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
you wouldn't have the infrastructure, the resources to even get that grant funding, because it's all
right.
kind of the same thing was true with organic certification. It just leans
Yeah,
toward making it easier for the biggest operations, most industrial organic operations to get it,
yeah,
and the small scale operations are like, it's not worth it, it's
yeah,
too expensive.
yeah. Because they
Um,
want you to give up on it. They make it very cumbersome and jump through hoops to so that you'll give up, so they can say, "Look at us, we did this great certification thing," and a few people got it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Jeff, are
uh,
you planning to do some grant funding?
We are looking at that. At the food entrepreneurship course my wife and daughter took, that was one of the things that was brought forward as a real opportunity for us. There's apparently where we are, because of the demographics of our town and county, we would qualify for like some sort of food desert type grant
nice.
Okay.
because we're
What's the
solving that
definition
problem.
of that?
Mm.
So, we're going to look into it. I think, last year we had an intention of applying for an equipment grant that would have allowed us to build the cold storage and buy a refrigerated truck.
Mm.
And we kind of missed the deadline just because I'm busy with my day job, which is one of the big complications for me right now.
Hmm.
But I think we're going to try to
Deadlines
take.
on those things are really short all the time too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
They'll have like a webinar. You go to the webinar, and they'll go, well, this is like max $100,000, but they'll give you all these like criteria, and they'll go, but we're still waiting on guidance from USDA, so we'll have something for you in 2 weeks. And then they tell you that in 2 weeks, oh, here's what you can do, and your grant deadline's a week later, and you're
Yeah,
like,
right.
oh,
Yeah.
geez,
I
Yeah.
know, it's totally
Yeah.
insane. But
Yeah.
I mean, at least from the food side of things, look into extension at NRCS because there is
Oh
still
yeah,
a lot of like equip funding that will fund like little things, not just on the farm
yeah,
too, but in like the food ecosystem.
yeah. We one of the business people at the food entrepreneurship course was had agreed to to meet with us, and so
Mm,
we're going to go. He said there's a pretty large grant that's available. It's really flexible how you use the funds, so we're going to look into that. I have not done any grant funding yet with the farm, and it's something that I think if I'm going to ever get it done, I'm going to have to do it. So
yeah.
you
Well,
know,
I mean, what's so funny is that the um the people we have on this podcast, like you all, with your small farms and your small stores, are actually the most free market people out there, and the corporations are like the welfare, government
yeah,
funded recipients, and it's just so fun. Like even Peter Allen, and I know you have said this to me before, Jeff, where you're just like, I don't really want to like I don't really want to get tied up with the government stuff. I'd rather just see if the market handles it, whatever. And
yeah,
part of it is just you don't really want to deal with the bureaucracy, but the other part is like I kind of want to see if I can like make this work. And you're the only person competing in the free market. It's like you
yeah,
like pig-headed small
yeah.
businesses, who are just like everybody else is getting help.
You start
Yeah.
feeling kind of naive and stupid after a while, though. Honestly,
Yeah, right. Like the whole system is rigged in this direction. Why am
yeah.
I, stuck in that? But yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of resources out there. Okay,
Mhm.
so as we're wrapping up, like, I guess anything I didn't ask or any big takeaways that you want to discuss still, Lucy, on this whole experience, what you plan to do, what you were saying you're some challenges of, getting enough sales to be able to keep going.
Mhm.
Any kind of message to the listeners, anything else you want to talk about that we didn't discuss?
I would say the only other challenges that I can think of is like advertising is just super expensive and it's very like, is that gonna work? I don't know.
Mm,
So it's a big risk for a really high cost, but also like if nobody knows that you exist, then like how are you supposed to start swimming rather than sinking? So
mm,
it's a really tough thing to figure out like what's going to work and what's not. Whereas like you've said, like the bigger companies, they just throw thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a month at it and they're just like it's working. It's like is
yeah.
it? I don't
Yeah,
know. Like
right. Yeah. I mean, I have heard of smaller businesses like either trying to do social media or like,
yeah.
if it's a smaller town, then you can at least try to like build a reputation,
Hmm.
amongst the actual community members. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally tough. Anything else from you, Jeff, that we haven't discussed that we want to get into before we wrap up?
Well, I will say something quickly about just the building, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah, that'd be great.
So so like we're part of this. Like we talked about the aesthetic a little bit. Part of this, the idea was let's be in our downtown, part of our downtown. There's a pretty good Newberry Downtown Development um, Association, which is like basically all the vendors downtown. People are very supportive, but we are spending money on the building to turn it into this retail space. It's going to we're keeping all the bare masonry walls. We're
Mm,
doing conduit for the electric, so that it does have that kind of rustic appeal. And we bought salvaged pendant lamp
mm,
lights from a hardware store behind us. So we're trying to really lean into the history of the place, keep that as as upfront as we can. It won't look as polished and finished as the stuff next door, but it's going to be hopefully authentically part of Newberry.
mm,
And so I think and that's another thing that was important to me. when we took the floor system out to redo it, we pulled up a bunch of 2x12 to 14-inch hardwood or heart pine flooring system. Like it's huge beams. We're going to try to reuse as much of that as we can. So it goes back to like the ethos of, reuse, recycle, not letting that waste. So we're trying to be like real about all of it. And I think that's the part that maybe going back to the grant conversation feels inauthentic. Like if it's real, shouldn't it be economically viable?
Right.
But it probably isn't economically viable, and it's probably never going to pay for itself. And I'm just kind of okay with that right now. Like I feel
Yeah.
like there may come a time where everyone's like, well, good thing we've got that store there because our community needs that from a resiliency perspective, or whatever. And, if we don't build those systems, those local ecosystems, and markets now, they'll be impossible to construct if we ever did need them. So
Yep.
I'm kind of just okay with it. Like you said earlier, I think people like Ben and Lucy and myself, we're kind of probably these are passion projects, and we hope they're going to be successful and that people will pay us for our time. But at the end of the day, our motivation is probably not always monetary. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so on that note, I'll just say I really appreciate you all coming to talk about this. I think that you are amongst a very small group that we will call part of the doomer optimism sphere of people who are totally um I would say, in my opinion, visionary into what the future needs more of and probably will require more of. You're just ahead of your time. And
yeah,
we need people who are totally pig-headed to lead the way and, stubborn and visionary. And that doesn't mean that you will necessarily be rewarded by the marketplace as it's currently constituted. But I think it's really important, and I think it's really cool and good, and hopefully inspirational to others, and others can sort of pick up the bandwagon. I do think that there is increasingly an interest to like support, well, your local farmer. I think it's part, when I say these stepwise things happen, something bad happens, everybody kind of freaks out, and then whole subset of people has a new set of knowledge, whether it's like homesteading skills or finding out where their local farmer is. So, they do get that knowledge, and it doesn't go away. And sometimes people fall away from placing value on it, but a whole new cohort comes in who like sticks with that each time this happens. So I would just say, like, keep up to the extent that you can, keep the things afloat to the extent that you can. And yeah, I mean, it's really cool to hear about and to talk shop on the details of it, and to, hopefully inspire others to shop local and to maybe even start their own little local stores. Any final thoughts? Any comments?
Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was really nice. All right, thanks, guys.
thanks, guys. All
All
right.
right, bye.
Bye.